staffing. So we were expected to do those same projects would do more projects with the same amount of staff. And so that, along with COVID and the delays that we had there with regards to when and where we could do work, the timing, but also the supply chain issues that came along with COVID, have impacted our ability to spend this money. So the ministry has recognized this, we've recognized this, and we want to ensure that we are spending our money on that annual basis. We also want to show how we are going to use our proceeds of disposition. Sorry, and not only did trustees ask for this, we've also wanted to show the ministry that we do have a plan for those proceeds, so that when costs are higher for our capital projects than expected, we do not have unlimited proceeds to be able to assist us and assist them in making up that difference. We also need to support the multi-year strategic plan. And I know that it's not finalized yet, but we know that student achievement and mental health and well-being will be an important component. And the physical school environment plays an important role in well-being and student achievement. We want to improve public confidence in TDSB schools, not only in how they look and how they're perceived, but also in how we use our resources and that we're using them appropriately. We want to create modern spaces that are accessible, equitable by design, support sustainability and equity of access to program. And these are statements from our website about different programs and the support for the strategy. So I'll give trustees an opportunity just to read through those. They are also included in the report. But you'll see that it comes from the secondary program strategy, from the equity inclusive education, from technology and caring and safe schools, and all of them support this culmination of an overall capital revitalization strategy. So what elements will help us to assess the condition of our schools? As we mentioned before, FCI is what we have used in the past, and that really looks at the individual components of a building. It takes our renewal needs over a 5-year period, divides them by the replacement value of the school for a percentage. It's calculated by the ministry, determined by the ministry, and we have used that, and the ministry uses that to assess the condition of the schools from a purely physical perspective. We also need to look at our program spaces. So we want to ensure that we have some standardization, so some guiding, some design guidelines across the district. We want modern spaces, so we want to be able to use technology appropriately, and we want equitable access to program, meaning that no matter where you are in the city, that you should have access to programs that support all pathways. We want to ensure that there's sustainability, so support climate action. We want to improve public perception and confidence, so we want the way that staff, students, and families perceive the condition of our schools and the way that they feel about our schools to improve. We know that when you feel good about where you are, that it impacts how you feel and how, and it does have an impact on student achievement. We also want to ensure that there's accessible pathways for all students, and we want to create spaces that are equitable by design, that affirm identity, including gender neutral washrooms, prayer spaces, and nutrition spaces. So originally, again, when we were looking at this and we said FCI is how we've sort of advocated for funding in the past. FCI is how we've determined the condition of the buildings in the past. We're not abandoning FCI, and we know that all of the elements that we're talking about here will actually improve FCI as well. But we do need to remember that as an educational institution, we need to be able to also impact program impact accessibility, equity. And so we think it's better to assess those individually rather than just look at FCI on its own. So we will, using those variables, we will classify our schools into either schools requiring minimal improvement, moderate improvement, or extensive improvement. And again, that will be based on the work that we do to assess all of those individual components that were on the previous slide. We will and do have a goal to not have any school buildings classified as requiring extensive improvement by 2035. So we recognize that this is an ambitious goal. We know we expect to start the implementation of the entire strategy by 2025. So this would be a 10-year project. And again, we know it's ambitious. We know that there are factors that we can't control. One of them being the fact that there's still a moratorium on school closures. And part of the strategy is to have to go through those pupil accommodation reviews that have been identified and to ensure that we are, as we close schools, the deferred maintenance in those schools that we are closing will disappear. In addition, we want to ensure that we're doing the work in these projects in schools that we know that are going to remain in the board's inventory. So again, pupil accommodation reviews are an important component of moving forward. That is our longer term goal. And our short term goal is, again, to reduce the number of schools classified as requiring extensive improvement. But we're looking at breaking it off into smaller chunks. So we're talking about a 25% improvement by 2028. So in a 3-year period. Again, we think it's important to have ambitious but realistic goals. There are multiple ways that we will achieve these goals, and we'll see that by the types of projects that we intend to undertake. But we will certainly keep trustees up to date and informed on our progress, and we'll report back publicly as well. The funding sources, we have 4 different main funding sources. We have school renewal, we have school condition improvement, and we have proceeds of disposition, which again, school renewal comes from the ministry, and it's about $50 million a year. And it is our, has the least restrictions. So we can use that funding to do many different renewal related projects. School condition improvement is funding that the ministry introduced in 2016-17. It's about $250 million. Again, it's intended to take care of those larger components at schools, but there are some restrictions, and one of them is the like for like. So if we want to introduce anything new in the buildings, and accessibility is a good example, we cannot use this funding source. So part of our discussions have been with the ministry on how do we ensure that we are doing all of this work that we need to do, and being able to use funding appropriately. So proceeds of disposition also has to follow the school condition improvement requirements, but we can ask for exceptions on our proceeds of disposition usage. And so we have indicated to the ministry that we would be looking for flexibility on the use of that funding. The last component is other, and it's one-time funding really. It's capital priorities funding that we receive from the ministry in order to either rebuild or build new schools, depending on accommodation pressure, sometimes consolidations, or in some cases, in the past, the ministry has provided funding for schools that need significant renewal as replacement schools. We also want to be able to use the value of our land, and that's where TLC comes in, and the modernization strategy that they have provided in the past. We want to be able to work with TLC to use some of those ideas that they have. And again, we're not saying that we're going to be selling significant land across the city in order to raise funds to build new schools. That's not the intention at all. It's how can we use our land that we have to support TDSB students along with other other ministries or the city, other people across Toronto. So an example would be the podium schools that we are building or that we are planning, or even the business case that we submitted for St. Margaret's, where we would use a portion of that land to build possibly either long-term care or housing. And then we would be able to use the money to be able to build the school. So again, we would definitely need to work with the ministry for those types of projects, but we know that that's got to be a component of moving forward. So for the types of capital projects, we would be looking at light retrofits. And again, these are for buildings that would need minimum to modern improvements. The work can be done during the school year or during breaks, like over the summer. There would be no displacing of students from the buildings while the work is being completed. Then we would have deep retrofits where we would use that for buildings that need moderate or extensive improvements. We would require the school to be vacant for a while. And so while the students are out of the building, we can do a significant amount of work in a much quicker time than if we're trying to do it while students are in the building. And it will require the use of holding schools. And then as we just talked about, the replacement and the new builds would be another component or type of project of the strategy. So for the implementation plan, there are really these steps, and we're just at the start of the implementation of the strategy. So we would have to identify standards, and by identifying standards, I mean when we look at program spaces and we look at design guidelines for elementary and secondary, what does a science lab include? What are the components to support programming that should be in all schools? So we will work with our schools and with the program staff to be able to identify and create those standards. Then we will assess and classify the buildings. So they would either be assessed or classified as minimum, moderate, or extensive improvements required. Once we have that, we will have an inventory of all the projects that need to be undertaken. So we would know as well, is that school going to be a school that we would identify as a deep retrofit, a light retrofit, or is it one of the schools that we would be looking to replace? And once we go through pupil accommodation reviews, there will be schools that would be identified as potentially closing. When we then we would know what the costs are in total. We are also at the same time identifying the budget from the funding sources that we talked about previously. We would prioritize those projects so we would know which projects would be occurring on an annual basis. And then we would be able to implement the plan. And so again, our intention is to start that implementation in 2025. We would continue to measure and report back. And we know that communication, not only with you, with trustees, with the school communities, and I think to gain public support for this strategy and for everybody to see themselves in this strategy, it's going to be really important that we strongly communicate how we are doing and the positive results that we're seeing and the good things that are happening at schools and that they can expect to happen in their schools in a certain time period. There will be guiding principles attached to the strategy. So a lot of them revolve around sort of the components. We want to provide a consistent range and quality of program spaces for all elementary and secondary schools. We want to make buildings and sites barrier free. So we want to have, again, a pathway for students. We want to ensure buildings are safe and healthy. And that's, I think that's an important, not only a guiding principle, but something for everybody to understand is our buildings are safe and healthy. That is where we are spending our time and money right now, is is to ensure that we are undertaking those projects which are health and safety related. And so we will continue to obviously address those issues, but then there will be added components as we address them. We want to refresh the interior and exterior finishes to create safe, welcoming environments for students, staff, and community use. We want to consider modernization of building components and systems to ensure energy efficiency, reduce greenhouse gases, and make the site climate resilient. And we want to minimize disruptions to students, families, and staff. We do recognize that as schools go through this, whether it's there's work happening in their school or whether it's they have to move to a holding school for a period of time, there will be some disruption in order for us to be able to create these spaces, but we want to minimize that for everybody involved. And then the other part is that the timing, because again, this is a 10-year strategy. So the work will take place over those 10 years, and we will have to use some guiding principles to help us to determine the timing of that work. So again, one of these is not more important than the other, and these are the things that we will consider when looking at the timing, but the funding source is one of them. For example, anything that we receive time-sensitive funding for, like capital priorities, those would be obviously undertaken to ensure that we benefit from that funding. The classification of the building, meaning that if it has been something that's classified as needing extensive improvements, then we will likely see, we will consider that in looking at the timing. The long-term pupil accommodation strategy is an important component because it would not be fiscally responsible to do extensive improvements in schools that are identified to go through a pupil accommodation review. Again, that's not to say that we won't do work there, because we know how long it can take to go through the entire process, and we will always ensure that our schools are safe. It's just those extensive, especially program-related components will unlikely happen until they've gone through the pupil accommodation review. And we will also look at the learning opportunities index of the school. So in some cases, we do, and we talked about this, we think it's really important to do work across the district on an annual basis so that everyone can see themselves in the strategy. But we will use the Learning Opportunities Index to help us to make some decisions. And so this is just the last slide before we talk about next steps, is how do we know if the strategy is successful? Well, obviously the overall goal in that lag measure is we will have less schools requiring extensive improvements. So when we reassess, we will see that those schools are either in the minimum or moderate category. We know that when we go through pupil accommodation reviews and we can either close, rebuild, modernize schools, we are also addressing underutilization and while we're addressing the renewal needs. So going through those pupil accommodation reviews will be key in the success of the strategy. We will use all the funding that's available to the board, specifically ministry funding, also using the funding from proceeds, so TDSB funding, as well as working with TLC to use the value of our land. We will complete work year round, and it's important that we can do a lot of work safely while students and staff are in the buildings. It may involve times when there may be moving of classrooms or for a short period of time, but that work does need to continue. It's an important part of being able to get all of the work done in the year, because obviously we can't do everything over the summer. Working with the city and ministry to expedite approved projects. So there are approvals to proceed from the ministry and site plan approvals from the city. We know how much time that some of these can take to get back, how much staff time it takes, and how long some communities are waiting for us to move to the next steps, and how that can have an impact on the total cost at the end. So we will do what we can to ensure that we are providing all the information and build those relationships between the ministry staff and the city staff to ensure that we can move things forward as quickly as possible. And overall, we should see a reduction in the number of work orders. And so right now, we have a lot of work orders, and sometimes they do take longer. We do prioritize those that are health and safety related. And so some people may be waiting longer for work orders that are not health and safety related. And so if we are doing this work and we have less health and safety work orders, we're able to do more scheduled maintenance, and we are able to address those work orders in a more timely basis, and there should be less of them. So those are some of the things that we will look at as we go along, to ensure that the strategy is working, and that we are on track to meet our goal. So for the next steps, we'll be looking for feedback from trustees today that will be considered, and we will bring a final report back to November 22nd PPC meeting that takes into account that feedback. We will use one-time funding that is provided by the ministry to hire somebody to oversee the strategy. We know that this isn't work that can sit on the side of somebody's desk. Our facilities team does a great job in the work that they're doing right now, but they cannot add overseeing the strategy if we want it to be successful. We do and will continue to report back as we move through the strategy implementation steps. So as we look at the assessment of schools, because I think that's where a lot of people go to as soon as we talk about the strategy, is what's my school, what's going to happen to it, and when's it going to happen. And so we know how important that is to be able to communicate. And so that is something that we will see come back here as well. But that, again, we will use all of the guiding principles in the components, the different components of the strategy, in order to help us to determine that information. And so that is the work that the person that is overseeing the strategy will be undertaking within the next year, so that the strategy can start in January 2025. That's the goal. And the only thing I'll say about that is, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, we have a number of strategies in place right now. We spent, I think it's about $310 million last year related to renewal. So there's significant planning that happens on the facility side, and there's a significant amount of money that's being spent. That will continue to happen, and that money will continue to be spent, and those strategies that have been previously approved will continue to be implemented, but they will be folded into this overall strategy once it's finalized. So I'm going to stop there, and I again apologize for my coughing and voice, and I will turn it over to questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Associate Director Zucker. First up, we have Trustee Laskin, who will be followed by Trustee DeVitis.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair, to Associate Director Zucker and the entire team. I guess I'm the only one around this table that was here in 2002 when we did the last efforts at this. And I just want to say how thankful and grateful I am that we're here again with a plan that I think is innovative, creative, makes use of all the pockets of money, and really does ensure that there is hope to make improvements regardless. Obviously, we all still hope that our schools are fully funded, and we would have more sources of funding to do this plan sooner. But I am very supportive of this. I don't have a lot of comments to make, except that in the old days, prior to amalgamation, when the Metro Board was in charge of all capital and facilities and all the other school boards fed into that, there was a 10-year plan. So you would know when your school was being painted. You would know when your windows were being done. You would know. So if parents asked you, you could say, yes, your school is going to be painted, but you're on the list in da 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 da. And I'm wondering, once you work with this, and obviously obviously trustees will provide you feedback, you will modify as you see fit, it will come back to us for approvals, but when your team actually works with this and the framework and the guiding principles and puts them over the canopy of all our 563 buildings, will it be possible to give parents those answers with some level of confidence that these are the 7 things we want to do at your school, and this is the approximate timeline by which we hope to get at it. Maybe that's pie in the sky dreaming, but I certainly know if one of our goals is to instill confidence, that is where I would love if we could get to as a system. So let me ask my second question now too. And then the other thing that I'm really very interested about is there are some things in the facility condition index, because it's just visual inspections, that raise real concerns when parents see that. And I'm very grateful that we're very public with that information. We're accountable. It's on every school's website. But I'm wondering if there can be, and I like the explanation that we have about facilities condition index on our website, so you can explain it, you understand how it's done. But I'm wondering if as part of the report back, when it actually comes to us for approvals, there can be more explanation of some of the changes that we're making that really work to address, our sustainability efforts. Like you mentioned part of the goals, so that give more bang for the buck, so to speak, in terms of taking that off the backlog, but also really improving, whether it's air quality or environment or whatever, in the school. So they're related. They have to do with being, transparent, as transparent as we can. Like, I know I have some schools where they put in a work order to, amend the washroom that's still from the 1950s, like a number of years ago, with no hope of that being done. I'd like to begin to give people hope that this plan will go a long way to addressing those concerns. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And through the chair, I will start, and then I will ask Executive Officer Pachetti if she'd like to add anything. So I think the schools will have so I don't know if we'll have a 10-year plan laid out, especially because it's contingent on a number of things, like going through a pupil accommodation review and that sort of thing. But they will know the assessment of their school. They will know the type of project that they would expect at their schools. And I think there's probably, a 2 to 5 year sort of plan is reasonable. I'm not sure if we can look at it, all of the 10, but we'll have to take that away. And I think that that's the work that the person who is responsible, or is going to be ultimately responsible for sort of pulling this all together, would be able to give us a better idea. But we certainly want this to be something that the community is highly aware of, that they can look forward to that work, and that we'll have a place for them to go to be able to have all of those questions answered. With regards to the second question, absolutely, we will want to ensure that the work that we're doing we can show where we're making improvements to sustainability, for example, or works when we do, even now, when we go in and we look at roof replacement. As we do the roof replacement, usually we're replacing, say, ceiling tiles and then putting in LED lighting as opposed to the fluorescent lighting, that sort of thing. So there's other improvements that happen along the way, and there's certain synergies that happen in cost savings that happen when you do a lot of that work together. So that would be the intention, is that that work is happening together, and that we will be very, very clearly able to show the improvements that have been made and how that is impacting one, the assessment of the school. So, if we did impact sustainability, then you'll see that score improve, and so that improves the condition of the building. But also through the climate change report for sustainability specifically, you'll see that. And for accessibility, we still have requirements to report that separately. So we will see different components of the strategy be reported elsewhere, as we're required to do, or as we have done in the past. For the intention is to be very open, very transparent, and to hold ourselves accountable to the strategy that we're putting in place. And the only way that we can do that is to have everything communicated and be very clear with everybody, with all stakeholders.
Thank you very much. And Madam Chair, can you put me back on the list?
Okay, thank you. Up next, Trustee DeVitis.
So through the chair, I want to thank staff for putting together this report. I want to start, before I ask a couple of questions, by saying that if this report wasn't here, this would probably be one of the priorities for me as a trustee, to be able to work on sort of having seen as a new trustee some of the needs out there. So very, very happy to see this here. I know it will be a very big endeavor. We're a lot bigger than we were 20 years ago, or before amalgamation, definitely. So the process to get to where we need to be will be very difficult. So I have a couple of questions, and one of them, I'm very happy to see as well that we have as one of our objectives, the sort of public perception, public facing elements that can help improve our projects. So two stats. The first question is, why is that there? Why is that significant?
Thank you, and through the chair. So as I indicated, this past year, facilities staff did over $300 million worth of projects in our schools. And a school can have some significant behind the walls type of work done. But it is possible that when you look at the work that's been done, you may not see it when you walk into the school. It may still not be as bright as you were expecting, or the painting may not have been done. And so it's harder, I think, for, the public to see that. I'll say the same thing. If we replace the furnace in our house, and somebody's going to say, well, it's in much better condition now, your house is worth so much more, whatever. Until the painting's done and the floors are replaced, you're not going to necessarily see that value. So that's one of the reasons. And the other is, we do want our spaces to be welcoming spaces. We know that individuals, sometimes families, sometimes have choice, whether it's another TDSB school that they may perceive as being stronger, or whether it's another school. And so we want to ensure that people have choices in their neighborhood for strong programming, for a school that they feel really good about, and that when they think about their school, it is a warm and welcoming place to be. So those are really the two main reasons why that's there.
Thank you. And my follow-up comment to that before moving on to a different question is that what I would like to see, because I think it benefits the program, it benefits the school board, and it benefits public education in general, is for us to celebrate these investments in a more conscientious way, right? To be intentional about it, to have a strategy around these celebrations. Lots of red ribbon ceremonies, even if it is stuff that's behind the walls, because we need to communicate these things better, not just to do the work, but to celebrate the work. And I think that ties in well with a number of other strategies that we have forthcoming. The other question was in regards to equity and why equity would be part of the framework for capital plans. So maybe you can speak to that a bit, and I wanted to add some comments around that as well.
Thank you, and through the chair, I think when we look at equity, we talk about equitable by design, or creating equitable spaces. And so when we talk about, we have different, such a diverse community that's attending our schools, we want to ensure that they're, again, welcoming for those students. And so whether it includes things like gender neutral washrooms or prayer spaces, foot washing stations, whether it is accessibility, which is separated because, again, the funding is a little bit different, but the other significant, I think, area that creates some inequities among our schools right now are just the ability to offer different nutrition programs and what can be offered based on the infrastructure that they have in place at the school. So we just want to ensure that, again, no matter where you are in the city, that the needs of your community based on the community are met. And so that we thought was an important component. Again, not necessarily funded by the ministry, not included in space template designs and anything else, but really important to support the well-being of our students.
Thank you for that. And through the chair, just a couple comments on that. Sort of working at the city, get to have a sense of how the two different institutions work, and as part of best practices, part of the sort of equity process in different departments, it is very common to see the transportation department have a heat map that looks at different social needs in the neighborhoods throughout the city to determine where they're going to put in bike share stations, or where the water department will do work. That is a common practice. That is a modern common practice as to how we see other institutions, other larger institutions determine the allocation of resources, because we understand that there are historical reasons why there may be pools in certain schools, for example, within the school board, not in others. Now, we want to continue having pools in as many schools as possible, but as we look at globally all our resources that we have, we also want to invest in those places, I think, that have not received all the programs that other schools have, and so on. And I think the nutrition programs is a really good example. So looking forward to seeing this. My last comment is very happy to see an expansion of staffing to deal with the program. I think that's very important. That's something that we have to realize, that in order to get the projects out quicker, we're going to have to invest in staff to be able to do the work. We won't be able to just simply be more efficient. That's not something that can happen without the resources, and it's very important for us to do the investment as the school board to get the money out. Something that I mentioned a couple of times, and I'll repeat, us not spending some of these monies, proceeds of these positions, and having it in the bank for a number of years as the pricing for construction goes up year to year, will eventually cost us money when we do spend it, right? Because it's often cheaper to move faster on projects. And as we have projects that the timelines grow, there's a number of different ways in which those projects get more expensive. So important for us to do the investment right, and to have the resource to be able to get the projects out as well. So with that, I'll be quiet. And I think I have 8 seconds left in my time, so I'm done. Thank you.
Did you want to be added back to the list? Okay. Trustee Earhart, we have you on the list. So next up we have Trustee King, then myself, then Dawson, then Earhart, then Laskin again. That's where we are in our rotation. Okay, go ahead, Trustee King.
Thank you, through you, Chair. This is exciting. Anytime I hear comprehensive strategy, that's exciting to me. Just want to thank staff, Associate Director Zucker and the entire staff, just for the clarity of the presentation as well. I thought the format and the layout made it just very easy to understand, and I really appreciate being able to see the breakdown of long-term and then mid to short-term goals. I just had a couple of questions, clarifying questions. I'm just still trying to understand if staff are seeing this as more of a rolling strategy, the way that we look at the long-term planning and accommodation, where things can move over time, or do you see this as being more of a definitive list where, to Trustee Laskin's point, we're able to kind of look at something that won't change over a range of time?
Thank you, Trustee King, and through the chair, it's a great question because there are some uncertainties right now, especially with regards to schools that have been identified as going through a pupil accommodation review. So that's why I think it would be hard to put every single school on a list from the beginning and say this is exactly what's going to happen, because we do not have 100% clarity in all cases. But we would be able to, and we have to plan, a couple at least of years in advance for those projects in order to even just be able to get them procured properly and planned for properly. So I think it's not necessarily rolling in the fact that things may or may not get done, or the things may change about what's going to happen. It's more, we will need some flexibility based on some of the outcomes of things like pupil accommodation reviews or discussions with the city about the potential for another podium school, or we receive capital priorities funding for a school and all of a sudden that moves further up the list. So there will be some flexibility that will be required.
Thank you, that's helpful. Separate question. I know that one of the challenges that we've heard staff talk about is the length of time that passes from the initiation of a project to the actual end, and the changes in costs and, basically in costs. Trustee DeVita spoke to that a little bit with how the extra staffing will help move those projects along quicker. I'm just wondering if there's anything else in this approach to the strategy that helps overcome any of those types of challenges that we've seen.
Through the chair, I will say that we will, by having a person responsible for the projects, that we will ensure that all work, by being able to group the work together, there will be synergies for sure. By creating design standards across program spaces, then that allows there to be sort of decisions to be made quicker up front. And again, by really working to build the relationships with the city, and again, not to say that we haven't been doing this up until now, it's just that concentrated effort on how do we move this forward. And I think once the ministry sees the plan start to move forward as well, they may be more willing to allow us some flexibility in the use of our funding when they see how this is impacting all TDSB schools.
Thank you for adding just those extra details. It's very encouraging to hear. And then my last question is on the subject of creating welcoming spaces, spaces that are aesthetically pleasing, that we feel good about being in. Can you just speak to where student voice kind of fits in and informs some of this, either through processes that we already do or anything that might be new as part of this approach?
Thank you, and through the chair, another great question, and that component, and again, we will look at the wording, whether it's public confidence perception, whether it is those spaces. How do we get feedback in order to help us to assess assess that component? And student voice will be an important part, because how students feel about their schools will impact their well-being and will impact their student achievement. In addition, we know that when we have spaces that that people feel good about, you take better care of those spaces. And so that also has a better impact on the regular sort of just upkeep of the schools and the cleanliness of the schools. So we think that student voice is a significant component. And I'm just going to ask Executive Officer Pachetti if she'd like to add anything.
Thank you very much, Associate Zucker, and through the chair. I think that we want to bring a more comprehensive approach to the work that we do, that includes looking at things like the signage that's outside and inside the building, clearing up clutter within the building, and to your point, involving students, but where can we involve them? There are lots of really interesting ideas where students can contribute to art that's put in places within the building, but done in a way so it doesn't look too cluttered. I'm a big declutter fan myself, as you can tell. So we're excited about this, because we don't just see this as being construction related only. It's going to be something that helps everybody to look at their building with a bit more of a critical eye, and how can I make it look more welcoming when I walk in, and maybe having 3 giant recycling totes in the front hallway is not the message we want to convey, nor the 1970s badminton trophy that's been sitting in the display case. So we're really excited about what this will bring in terms of an opportunity to just bring everybody along.
If I can just respond to that through the chair, I completely appreciate that staff wants to include and plans to include student voice. I'm not hearing specifically where that happens, whether it's at the school level, whether it's through our Senate and our trustees. So I think I might just, as part of my thinking and the feedback, whether it might be worthwhile to work that into guidelines as well, as to how we gather and apply that in a way that is also going to be equitable and consistent across that comprehensive strategy. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee King. I'm going to pass the chair to Vice Chair Shen just to ask a quick question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Just with respect to the funding source for the coordinator, the person who's going to bring this all together, it says it's a one-time funding source. So what does that mean? Does that mean this is sort of a year-long contract position that we're putting out to create it? And I know this was kind of what Trustee King was getting at a little bit, but I guess I wondered what grant, specifically I was wondering what does this funding come from? Was this something that the ministry has provided to get schools utilizing their funding more effectively, or is this a one-time source that I guess I just wanted to understand a little bit, and what would happen after that, just to ensure that we keep this going, because I do hope that this will become something like what Trustee Laskin was talking about, where we have the sense that, every 10 years you get a library refresh in terms of like the carpet and the, I don't know, like they're just that schools kind of know that there's a schedule, kind of the way people try to do that with home maintenance and things like that, just so that we don't get in the place where the repair is so extreme, you know, that we're in an emergency situation. That's in my wildest fantasies, we have enough money to somehow get into or we get to a stage where we're in that cycle. So I guess I just wondered, could you just explain a little bit more how this one-time funding works and whether we're in a bind after this?
So thank you, and through the chair, the ministry has provided in the last few years some funding for additional planning and staffing related to capacity, and we haven't, through COVID, used that funding. So it is continuing right now. I just don't know if it will continue on an ongoing basis. So we plan to use not only some of the carry forward that relates to that. We know that we're going to have, when we get to pupil accommodation reviews, we're going to need to use some of that funding to assist us in additional staffing that will be required to administer the reviews. So that funding between this position and the additional resources that may be required for pupil accommodation reviews would be used. And again, we refer to it as one time because it's not necessarily put right into the GSN yet, but it has been being provided on an annual basis for a number of years.
Okay, thank you, and I can take the chair back. Okay, so up next we have Trustee Dawson. Please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much to staff for this excellent report. And Associate Director Zucker, I hope you're feeling better. I feel bad that you had to come on for this big report at a time that you're not feeling well. So I appreciate you being here. I did just have a quick question along the lines of what Trustee King had mentioned with respect to timelines of projects. So oftentimes when projects are delayed in my schools, it's because they're waiting for someone from the TDSB to install something. So an actual TDSB employee versus when we have contractors, the work tends to get done quicker. At least that is my experience. I can't say for across the board. So I was wondering, are staffing considerations being taken in with this report? Like, will we be increasing staff? Is that part of it? Or am I sort of wading into the weeds here?
No, thank you. And through the chair, it's a good question. And we will need to look at the resources that we have on hand and whether or not this is something that we can take on with their existing staffing, or do we need to look at contracting out more? We know that there are costs associated with contracting out. We also know that we have vacant positions right now. And so, you know, if we could have all of those positions filled, we'd be in a better position to be able to probably implement this in a more timely manner. So I think it's something that we're going to have to look at, is how do we ensure that it's resourced properly? It's going to be an important component to making sure that this happens in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you. And also along the lines of what Trustee King had mentioned with respect to student voice, will community voice be a part of this?
Through the chair, I think that will be something that we have to consider. You know, is it as easy as some sort of survey that people, if they want to complete, they can, you know, something that you see in even in like the airport when you go, are you happy, are you sad, kind of something that easy. We will work with our research department to determine the best way to receive feedback and from who we should be receiving feedback, because I do think that when we're looking at public confidence, that we're not just looking necessarily at, obviously we want our students and our staff and our families to have that confidence in us, but what role does the overall community play in providing that feedback? So that is something that we will look at.
Okay, thanks. And I think, you know, specifically, what does community consultation look like for new schools that aren't built at all? How are we reaching out to residents, particularly when those spaces may be created within mixed use spaces, or if, you know, something like the field or yard is going to be used by the community as well as the school. So I think that's important in particular. So thank you so much. Those are my questions. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have Trustee Earhart, followed by Trustee Laskin. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, and my apologies for being a bit late in coming here today. There were transit delays, but I rode part of the way with a very lovely gentleman who was a retired TDSB tradesperson who was very excited that we would be discussing this today. And so I thought I would share that to start. I also wanted to say that I do ride transit fairly regularly on the Gerrard streetcar, and there's a number of schools in the ward I represent along the Gerrard streetcar. So in the morning, I get to talk with a lot of students if they're willing to talk with me, which is not as often as I would like. The most frequent thing they tell me once they learn that I'm a trustee and what they'd like to see in schools is something to do with the facility. It might be I would like the water fountain to be working. I'd like the stairs to be repaired. You know, I care about facilities quite a bit. So maybe I'm more attuned to it, but I've really heard that it matters. And so I just think it's so thrilling that this has come to board, because I do, at least from what I'm hearing from community, we're looking for something to rally around that's hopeful around revitalizing our schools. And so I totally see this as the next phase in discussing the infrastructure backlog to talk about what we can do to build that sense of pride in our schools, to continue to foster that sense of pride in our schools. So I'm so happy with this. And now I'm going to dive in with a few very detailed questions. I thought it was fantastic. I did want to ask, though, about a few areas that relate to ventilation, climate adaptation, and generally public health and safety. And so I'm wondering, I saw ventilation referenced a few times in the report, and I'm just wondering where we see ventilation, climate control, and clean air fitting within the revitalization strategy. I know in my community in particular, the public will be interested in seeing explicitly where HVAC or ventilation related systems would be proposed for updates. Thank you very much. That's the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, and through the chair. Before I turn to Executive Officer Pachetti, I will say that this is something that a lot of the work that's been happening, and I'm going to say behind the walls, in the past maybe has not been seen as quite as important, even though it was very important work that we were undertaking and very expensive work that we were undertaking. It wasn't necessarily seen as something that was improving the school. And so we know that that has changed, and that work does happen and continues to happen, and will be part of the, you know, if we are updating a science lab, well, at the same time, we need to look at all of the ventilation associated with it. Or when you're doing, you know, ceiling replacements, that's the time that you can get behind the walls. So I think it's always been a really important component of what we've been undertaking as part of our annual renewal, and will continue to be, and will be a significant component of sort of addressing the FCI. It's a really big component of FCI, but I will ask Executive Officer Pachetti to speak to this as well.
Thank you, and through the chair, if you go on our ventilation webpage and download our ventilation report, you will see that it is a considerable investment that we put into ventilation $140 million for 23-24 planned and underway. So it is something that we prioritize, and it is very costly, and it can be very disruptive work. And so saying that, I think it's very hard for us at this point to just give a blanket statement that everything will be brought up to current standards, because I think you do need to look at every single building. There's, unique site challenges and conditions. But where opportunities exist, we will certainly take advantage of those. In particular, for some of the deep retrofit projects where we have the time to go in and do destructive work without having to worry about, safety and relocating students while the work is happening.
Okay, that's great, and thank you so much. I had one other question. I noticed the word climate vulnerability in there, and I know we have a climate change strategy that really focuses on greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Many provinces, not Ontario, but also the federal government, are looking at climate adaptation considerations when retrofitting public buildings, and I know this is something that I've heard in many conversations with TDSB staff is reflected, and just my personal fascination, but also my community's concerns with drainage and a number of other areas that are affected by increasing storms in particular. I'm wondering how climate change adaptation is reflected in our thoughts around revitalization. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and through the chair, we actually do discuss that and provide some actions in our climate change report about making our sites more resilient to climate change. So for example, as we do a paving project in a schoolyard, creating more areas of soft surfacing, permeable areas, so that when we have these, I was going to say unprecedented rainfalls, but actually we've had the 100-year storm now 4 times. So when we have these intense rainstorms or intense weather, there's a place for the water to go. And at the same time, we are also increasing the amount of tree planting that we are doing. So whenever we have an opportunity to do a major site project, those are the kinds of things that we look at, in addition to accessibility, to making the site more accessible.
Okay, that's great to hear, and thanks so much. And then just as a last piece of feedback, I just wanted to echo what I've heard from Trustee DeVitis and also from others around celebrations. I know we're coming close with Jones Avenue School, and I can just say from that experience in our community, the high level of interest in what's happening with the major capital works. People want to know, they care about the schools. Some are alumni, some have gone by the schools for years. There's a high level of interest in what's happening. There's some interest in how it will affect the community more broadly, but there's also a desire to celebrate and to be part of our public schools. And so I want to invite that as a way, not just for public engagement, but public communication around what's happening with major capital works as something to consider moving forward. And thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Earhart. Next up, we have Trustee Laskin. We're back at the beginning. I haven't heard from anybody else, but you know what? Before you go ahead, let me just ask. I know it looks from online. It looks like we have Trustee Rajagulasingham, Rajwani, and Patel who have joined. Trustees, if you could just let us know if you're here. We just want to confirm.
Trustee Rajwani is here.
Thank you. Trustee Patel, Trustee Rajagulasingham. Actually, I don't see Rajagulasingham anymore, do you?
Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Patel. Yeah, okay. Trustee Rajagulasingham. Okay, we'll assume she's not here. Okay, Trustee Laskin, please go ahead. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, so.
Thank you very much. So further to the conversation about trying to ensure the document is really accessible to everyone, I think the inclusion of pictures would be, as examples, would be really great. So when we talk about modernizing science rooms, there could be a picture. When we talk about different spaces, there could be a picture, because improving, whatever it might be. I just think that, some before and after photos, I think can be really impactful. And sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I'm wondering if staff can, in an appendix or however you want to do them. And in the inclusion of those pictures, because this is a system document, I would really hope that there could be, it doesn't have to be from every ward, but at least pictures from every learning center. So I think that would be great. And then I just wanted to comment, because of the development in my ward, I have been privileged to be involved in the creation of a few new schools that within our guidelines of creating new schools, there absolutely is a component of community input. There's a local design team that actually involves parents and staff from a school, but there also are public meetings. And I think the guidelines only require one, but I've never been part of a project where one is enough. So you work with your community, and at different stages of the project, you facilitate community meetings. And more importantly than that, the decks, the notes, everything, Q's and A's from those meetings go online. We have a wonderful website that you may not be aware of if you haven't actually had a park or a program review, where all of these, and historically it goes back a number of years, are listed, and all the information's there, all the documentation is there. So you can always refer to that again. So I just wanted to say, I must say, I use that website a lot because all the information is in one place, and it's really helpful to explain to parents the genesis of some of the projects, especially those Q&A documents. They're invaluable. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for considering photos.
Okay.
Thank you. I just went through the chair, through the capital projects update. We will be publicly showing a number of before and after pictures to show the work that's being done. But I think it will be important to include, and I think it does help to create some excitement. And it also, when you're reading about the standards, it's a lot easier sometimes to see the differences that this work will create through the before and after pictures. So thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions, so we just open this item for, oh, I need a mover and a seconder, sorry. Trustee Laskin, Trustee Didavides, and this is for receipt.
Dawson in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Patel in favor.
Trustee Payne.
Rajagul Singham in favor.
The VT's in favor.
And Lee is in favor. I'm just not seeing the vote coming up on e-script.
Trustee Lee, Trustee Sriskandaraja, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Lee, I voted in favor, but I'm just saying I don't see the vote coming up in e-script at all.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Lee. Okay, we are closing the vote. Okay, Trustee Rajwani has to leave the meeting. Okay, next up, we are on item number, well, it's sort of the new 5.2, I guess. This is the long-term program and accommodation strategy, 2023 to 2032. And I will turn it over to Director Russell Rollins to introduce this report, please.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, the long-term program and accommodation strategy, which takes us to 2032, is, I think, a complement to the capital revitalization strategy that you just reviewed. Many of you will know the long-term pupil program and accommodation strategy is a summary of a collaborative annual planning process that reflects input from trustees as well as the work of our planning team. I will now turn it over to either Associate Director Zucker or System Planning Officer Andrew Gowdy.
Well, thank you, Director. Good evening, trustees, staff, and members of the public. Through the chair, this evening I'm accompanied by Senior Manager Dan Castaldo and Senior Advisor Sandra Gatti. We are pleased to present to you the long-term program and accommodation strategy for the 10-year period 2023 to 2032. This is a report that we present to you each year at this time for your approval. As the director said, the long-term program and accommodation strategy, or LTPS, is a collection of studies that we will conduct over the next 10 years. The studies address program and student accommodation issues such as overutilization, underutilization, and program accessibility. The report is a product of an annual cycle of review. Every year, we update the LTPS to look out over the following 10-year period. We update it with the latest projections, program data, and facility data. We update the studies to include any new issues that have emerged. The LTPS can be described as a 10-year rolling plan. The process to update the LTPS is highly collaborative, involving both the academic and business sides of the organization. It involves collecting data from the main departments in the board. It involves reviewing the data and identifying gaps, issues, and needs using a set of board-approved guiding principles that are focused on providing neighborhood schools and equity of access to programming. The gaps, issues, and needs are discussed with all trustees and superintendents, as well as key central staff and staff of the Toronto Lands Corporation. In total, there are over 80 people who are involved in the process. The document before you is the 10th edition of the Long-Term Program Accommodation Strategy. We first started this process in 2014. Since then, we have completed over 220 studies. These studies have balanced enrollments across schools, increased access to programs, secured funding to build additions and new schools, and achieved efficiencies by reducing surplus space across the system. This edition of the LTPS contains 151 studies to be completed over 10 years. The studies are listed in the document by study type as well as by ward. The first year of studies is referred to as the annual planning document. These are the studies we'll undertake in the 23-24 school year. Once approved by board, the annual planning document becomes our work plan for the current year. There are 33 studies that will be active this year. This includes studies that were commenced in an earlier year that will continue, as well as new studies that will be initiated. The studies will begin with the internal exercise involving staff and impacted trustees called the Local Feasibility Study, and then move on to the appropriate public engagement as indicated by our policy, Accommodation and Program Review P068. Many of these studies will report out to board for decision-making in the months to come. While we are conducting the studies in the annual planning document, we will also be running the next cycle of the process to update the LTPS. In the spring, we will be meeting with trustees, superintendents, and key staff to review studies and issues. In the last cycle, we met with trustees and superintendents by ward. This spring, we are proposing that we meet by learning center to give trustees and superintendents a regional perspective. Once approved by board, the LTPS will be posted on the board's public website. We will also communicate the LTPS to a wide audience, including staff, parents, and other levels of government. This concludes our presentation. We'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Trustee Laskin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you very much for this incredible work. For those things that are going to be starting in the wards in 2023, 2024, when's the latest those would be initiated? Through you, Madam Chair, to staff.
Through the chair, some of the studies we've already begun as of this September, with the first stage being the local feasibility. We are prioritizing them based upon the urgency of the accommodation matter. Some of the issues are very urgent, and we're hoping to have some changes approved in time to influence admission for 2024. So those are the studies that are underway now. So studies that could have an implementation date later than September 24 will be initiating later on this school year, for example, in the spring.
It could be helpful, and I don't want to really add to your workload at all. I appreciate that through you, Madam Chair. But it might be helpful to give trustees an idea of the timing of some of their 2023, 2024 projects, so they also can think about that in terms of their own schedules, because some of them, depending on what they are, can be fairly intense. So if you can give us a heads up, I know I, for one, would sincerely appreciate that. The second one I have is some of the ones that are contingent upon the moratorium being lifted. Are we going to move forward with some so we are ready when a moratorium is lifted? Through you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, at this moment, we're not conducting the local feasibility study for those pupil accommodation reviews. I think we are monitoring and waiting for the ministry to share plans. While we are monitoring, it is allowing us to proceed with other projects that have urgency associated with them, like ones that we want decisions to influence September 2024. So at this moment, I don't think beginning local feasibility studies for the pupil accommodation reviews is the best use of our time.
Thank you very much. Those were my questions, Madam Chair.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other trustee questions online or in the boardroom, so I think we'll open the vote on this. Oh, can I have a mover and a seconder for this? Trustee McLean and Trustee Hassan, and we will open the vote. Okay, and I'm in.
Sriskandaraj in favor.
Dawson in favor.
Trustee Pay in favor.
Rajagopal Singham in favor.
Patel in favor.
Lee's in favor.
Okay, and that has carried unanimously. Up next, we have item number, where are we, 6.1, and this is the OBSPA Director's Report. So I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Arts, who will get us started on this.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I'll go through, I did send an update by email, an emailed copy of this to trustees and some attachments. I would please really encourage you to read the attachments that have come from OBSPA in this, and I'll highlight them as I go through. The first is a thank you to any trustees that have participated this last week or are continuing to participate in Local Government Week. So every year, the provincial government declares 1 week in October as Local Government Week, and this is a great way to get out to your communities and your schools, especially to highlight the importance of civic awareness and civic participation. I will say I have been able to visit a number of my schools and am continuing to visit schools and talk to grade 5 students who study government in the curriculum, and grade 10 civics and grade 12 politics students who are studying government and have conversations about the importance of being involved. I will be, for my side, I will be taking back some advocacy back to OBSPA because none of my schools are actually learning about school boards as a part of the government structure. So there's been a lot of learning I'm finding for staff as well. It's been a great experience, and if trustees would still like to engage with this, I do have some resources to share. Really important right now, you'll see from OBSPA that all trustees get legislative updates or listed as a Hansard and news updates that come from OBSPA staff. So some of the pieces that are being highlighted right now, I know they send a lot of emails. There's a news report every day. There's a Hansard report every day. It is a lot to go through, but I would really highlight this for trustees to pay attention to right now because the regulations for Bill 98, the Better Schools and Outcome Act, are hitting the floor right now, and they're coming fast and furious. So 2 of them have already passed consultation this past month. OBSPA is participating. We provided, as the TDSB, also provided comment on this most recent one that was disposition of properties. But right now, what just hit the ground is our 2 new portions of that act, the act that are going to be regulations, and one is changes to directors of education performance appraisals. And this is particularly important for trustees because our only employee is the director of education. And as local boards, we want to have as much of our own say as possible in what we want from the performance of our director. This is really not something that we want to have be one size fits all and having the province dictate what our director should be doing as opposed to having them work with us as our partner. The other one that's of particular concern is there is a consultation posted right now on accelerated apprenticeship pathways. So the government is looking to expand apprenticeships. And while this is generally a good thing for awareness, what they are proposing is that is lowering the age of when a student can start an apprenticeship, lowering the number of credits they have to have, high school credits they have to have before they can start an apprenticeship. And they are floating around the proposal that once a student starts at the age of 16, a full-time apprenticeship, that they might be removed from the school board. And this is a big concern. And one of the, OBSPA has previously responded to this area of the act before it was passed. This is one of the big concerns is safety and supervision. I know the province and education systems work really hard to lower the rates of safety incidents, so injury and death in apprenticeships and for trainees. And so a big concern that not just lowering the age, but removing students from school boards removes really critical safety considerations for their training. And also moves away from, the province has moved to de-streaming. The idea behind de-streaming being that we open as many pathways as possible for all students, that we don't pigeonhole them in academic pathways or applied pathways. And lowering their number of credits really streams them much earlier into a single pathway. And we want the doors, as a provincial focus, we want the doors to all opportunities, post-secondary opportunities, to be open to students as much as possible. So these 2 pieces are actually posted for public comment. So I invite trustees to go read what's posted there. You can give comment. If you have organizations that would be concerned in this, they can also post their comments. OBSPA will be commenting through, I think it's November 8th that the policy work group is meeting to finalize feedback. And we have our chair, who has our mandate from earlier this year to make comments on Bill 98. So please have a look. There's a new bill that's posted that is an NDP bill from Mr. Pasma. And it's Improving Air Quality for Our Children Act. So that is that's at the stage of first reading, and will be interesting to see how that rolls out. In terms of events and what's happening now, I'll pass it in a moment to Trustee Dawson for an update from the Black Trustees Caucus. I just really want to highlight to everybody that on November 4th, the TDSB, so us as trustees, we are hosting the Central East Regional Meeting for all the school boards in our region. So that's 6 school boards plus all the local school authorities, like the Blue School Authority, the hospital school authorities, to come together. And this is not just for the OPSPA directors, this is for all trustees to attend. It's a great networking event. We will be hosting PD in the morning. We'll be hosting it at the Center for Excellence for Black Student Achievement, which ties in really well to the PD that was offered by Superintendent Karen Murray earlier this year to OPSPA. It's on a Saturday, and it's a really nice day to network and find alignment with our neighboring boards. The next Good Governance Workshop is coming up on November 22nd. I just saw the email went out inviting people to register for this Lunch and Learn. The topic for the upcoming session is on delegations and managing challenges around delegations. And I know staff just sent around a request to see whether or not you're going to attend the 2024 Public Education Symposium. So for those who don't know, PES, the Public Education Symposium, or PES, is 2 days of professional development and networking available to trustees and senior staff, senior leaders in education. It's a great event, and that's taking place in January 25th and 26th. And but you do need to get pre-approval for the registration fees. And turning it over to Trustee Dawson.
Thank you. So I'm going to do the report about the OPSPA Black Trustees Caucus. The OPSPA Black Trustees Caucus provided a submission to the Ontario Human Rights Commission's consultation on anti-Black racism in education. This submission outlines OPSPA's Black Trustee Caucus vision for Black student success. And we identified 4 key areas of focus, which are Black student achievement, well-being, excellence, and joy, enforcement and accountability mechanisms, pathways for parent, caregiver, and community involvement, relationships, policy, and advocacy. It was an honor to contribute to this important work alongside TDSB board colleagues, Trustee King and Trustee Williams, and members of the caucus representing Durham, Simcoe County, York Region, and Peel Region school boards. We additionally had an opportunity for meaningful consultation in person with senior staff at the Ontario Human Rights Office at a hybrid meeting on September 22nd. And as part of this advocacy, OPSPA calls on the provincial government to join in and co-lead this important work to expand it to all areas of the province for all Black and Black identifying students and their communities. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I do know that at the end of Trustees Weekly, that was sent out Friday, there is, or within Trustees Weekly, there was an RSVP for the November 4th regional meeting. So please, if you haven't responded to that RSVP to Trustee Services, please let them know whether or not you're attending.
And we will provide that reminder again. We've already put that in for this week's Trustee Weekly as well. So, but we do want to make sure we get those numbers down. And thank you for, or numbers in. Thank you for organizing all that. I'm not seeing any further questions. Oh, so I'm sorry, Trustee Earhart, please go ahead.
Oh, was this for the whole OPSPA update? Okay. Thanks very much. I wanted to introduce a motion as business arising tonight, stemming from Trustee Arts's update. As a board, we did do a motion earlier on Bill 98 and its implementing regulations, where we gave some positions to the chair around Bill 98. But in that, I need to be honest, that the province did announce its intention for accelerated apprenticeship pathways in March of 2023. There were warning signs then. They also introduced amendments in the legislation in the updated Education Act that opened the doors for increased apprenticeships. I myself am a huge supporter of STEM, expanding apprenticeships. I'm someone who worked in this area as a policy area to try to expand completion rates for apprenticeships. I care very much about it. I was also an 18-year-old student in an Ontario college and university at a time that there were workplace deaths on job sites. And I will not forget my first time at the age of 18 on a job site. And I can only imagine what that experience is for 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds in our system. We have established programs right now that have gone through several phases of occupational health and safety oversight that are very important. This is an area that we have to continually work on. But I'm just like, I am gobsmacked that there is such a short consultation for such major changes to this program and to the thousands of students in our system that work in the trades and apprenticeships through our system. This risk being streaming, the health and safety oversights, the defunding of education through both models. I can't believe that we're talking about back to basics and about keeping students in school after what we've experienced in the pandemic. And then a plan like this comes out that's removing the basics from students, removing them from the school board entirely potentially, and taking them out from those supports. So I think it is so important that we have a position on this. There is a very long motion there. The whereases really relate to that OPSPA spoke out on this already and is doing work on this, which is fantastic, and this relates directly to this. People for Education has put out a report on this, raising important questions about this being a potentially new form of streaming, and noting that apprenticeship pathways right now only have a little over a 30% success rate. And so what happens to the other 2/3 of students who aren't successful in completing their apprenticeships if we don't make gains in that area as well? And that's a really crucial consideration when we're thinking about students potentially leaving the supports of school boards. Moving down, the UN Convention of Rights on the Child, which I think is really important to reference here because it makes important references for those under the age of 18 with respect to treatment in workplaces, workplace exploitation, as well as access to education. So a lot of whereases. And then we go into be it resolved that our chair respond to the consultation on behalf of the board, explicitly rejecting models that would remove students from public school boards prior to the completion of a high school diploma. That is option 2 of that has been put forward by the province, and support models with the following characteristics. And I'm just going to backtrack quickly now. I can see I'm going to run out of time. But I do, because everyone can read this screen, I want to read very quickly what the descriptions of the models. And so Model 1, equivalent apprenticeship learning, students would remain a pupil of their school board and be partially funded on the secondary school register. Even in the first model that would keep students in school boards, they would only be partially funded. So it is also a defunding of school boards under this proposal. And then Model 2 would remove entirely from all supports and also not able to participate on sports teams. I want to flag that because both models are bad. They explicitly stated in their consultation that they're open to a wide variety of scenarios, but we're requesting inputs on these 2 models. I personally believe both models should be rejected, but I believe it's it's incredibly important for our board to speak out on the second, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and thanks so much.
Okay, we're going to start with Trustee DeVitis. I saw that hand go up, and if anybody, I have Trustee Arts. Any other hands? Just Trustee King? Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, just a question for the mover. Maybe if you can go back and, well, first of all, thank you for putting this together. And I'm going to be supporting the motion, waiting to see what other folks think and so on. But I would want to support a motion that continues to encourage our students to complete their high school education, and that looks at keeping the funding and the training within the public system. Can you maybe explain a bit the difference between the two different models with a bit more detail?
Thanks very much. And so I had quickly, I mean, it is a short report available on the ontario.ca website, and it is short, and I want to emphasize, I think the fact that it's short is incredibly concerning. We would normally have town halls for at least a year when contemplating a significant change like this, and that we have a government that is putting something like this out with such a short consultation and such a light amount of thinking on it when it comes to young people, minors, and their workplace health and safety, as well as their access to secondary education. I continue to be astounded. And so I did describe very quickly one aspect of the first model. I'm going to describe the second model here. Again, they said they are open, that these are not the only models they are exploring. They're open to a range of models. They said in the second model, students would not be considered pupils of a school board. No secondary school credits would be earned by the student for their apprenticeship experience while they work towards their certificate of apprenticeships. As you move further down, it says additionally, these students would not have access to school board services and supports. So I hope, does that help?
Yeah, no, it does. And through the chair, C.W. Jeffries is in my district, is one of the first schools that went through the process of de-streaming at grade 9 and 10 for certain courses that we know are incredibly important, like math. And that those things are now being adopted throughout the province, right? This is bringing back streaming into our schools. And streaming that also defunds the system as well, because it reduces the number of students in the system. To me, that's so counter to our principles, our values, and our objectives. Very easy to say that our dropout rate is lower if we don't have to account for the students that are going off in that direction. And, that's not a direction that I would like us to go into. So I'd like to hear from other folks around this issue, but I do feel strongly that supporting such a statement would be important. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have Trustee Arts, followed by Trustee King.
Thank you. Thank you to the movers for this motion. I want to relay something about 2 years ago, I guess, when de-streaming was introduced from the province as a province-wide. So TDSB has been doing this work, and a few other school boards have been doing the de-streaming work since 2014. Our expectations were ahead of the province. Thankfully, the province got on board. About 2 years ago, as part of a scholarship program anyway, I knew somebody from the scholarship program asked somebody from the TDSB to come and speak to programs and things like that. And I met with our experiential learning staff, and they were over the moon about de-streaming in Ontario, because de-streaming would open up opportunities for everybody. One of the things that they said they were always battling is that technical programming, no matter how difficult that programming is, those courses, are not encouraged by parents who think their students should be entirely in academic streams. So streaming doesn't just keep students in applied out of the academic grade 9 and 10 math, it keeps students whose parents don't understand trades, or communities don't talk about trades, out of experiencing trades. De-streaming is a way to take stigma away from courses and open up more opportunities for everyone. One of the challenges we have is that the province no longer supports, the ministry no longer supports the way it used to, exposure to trades at an earlier age, like in middle school. So I have an amazing middle school that cleaned out its shop was still intact. It hadn't been, its shop actually hadn't been repurposed for something else like it has in a lot of schools. They cleaned it out, they got a grant, they filled it with shop tools. They also have a full kitchen. They do community cooking programming. They do, their teachers are all being trained in shop courses. They have a beautiful program that exposes students to all kinds of social justice education, growing your own food, a mix of academic and applied, I guess if for another word, but the academic standard or basic programming in literacy and math and English, as well as those hands-on experiences. And I wish that every school could have that. But we don't have the funding for that. The ministry doesn't fund it. One of the things that really resonated with me in the earlier consultation for Bill 98 is that an earlier de-streaming, and especially one that will take students out of the system, will deepen the stigma from families around trades. It's not going to benefit. A better approach from the province would be to actively promote trades as an equal and valued education stream as the college and other college and university streams. And that's not in their proposed models. Promoting trades to women, to young women, is not in their proposed model. So expanding the respect and value of trades is not in their proposed model. And this kind of piece that puts students at risk of not getting a high school diploma, of taking them out of the social and mental health and well-being supports that a school provides, as well as that, that long-term connection to community, social programming. That's a great point about not being able to have sports teams, clubs, and those kinds of interactions. Is going to harm that pathway. I think that we do need to do more work to promote trades and build up the value of them and that kind of education for our students. But it has to be done in a way that families will also see the value, and we can convince them of, these great work and career, training and career opportunities for their students that they will consider to be equal to all the other pathways that are open to students. So I fully support this, and I hope we can incorporate some language about good ways to promote trades and trades education, as opposed to this model that takes students out of the education system.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Arts. Trustee King, you're up next.
Thank you, through the chair. I want to thank the movers as well for flagging this, really pulling it out, bringing it to our attention, and allowing some chance for some public discussion and awareness about it. I'm in support and I agree with so many of the points that have already been made, so I'm not going to reiterate them. But I will say the minute I heard this, the big flag for me was the streaming point, and just seeing this as a potential for a pipeline of young people that might be more economically challenged, racialized, making a decision at a very young age that can have a very long-lasting impact on their life. I have a 14-year-old right now, and I look at where they are, and I can't imagine my 14-year-old in just 2 years making the kind of decision that would take them out of public education and just change the trajectory of their life like that. So that's hugely concerning, along with the defunding and the safety issues. I thought it was interesting that you brought up the issue of not being able to participate in sports, because that just takes me into all kinds of other ripple effects as somebody that understands what sports can bring in terms of a pathway for students as well. This takes away the opportunity for scholarship. It takes away the opportunity for further developing our social and our sporting infrastructures as well. And that might seem like very minor, but it just shows you how these big decisions have these other little ripple tangent kind of effects. And then my last point is I believe that we have programs that allows students to get the apprenticeship and trade experience while staying in a school environment, while completing their diploma or certificate. And I'm just wondering if the mover had a chance to just talk with staff a little bit about what we already have in place and what we might be investing in. Just to improve on all the points that have been discussed. And if you haven't already had that conversation, if there are any staff on the line that might be able to respond to that, just so our public is also aware of what's already available within our public education system in this board.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I would ask Associate Director Audley Salmon to begin, please.
Good evening, and through the chair. Yes, we do have a series of programs that are geared towards allowing students to complete their secondary diplomas while engaging in a pathway towards apprenticeship. The key three that we have are our OYAP, Ontario Youth Apprenticeship type program that allows students to be in the secondary school while also going through the training for in a particular apprenticeship type area. We also have dual credits that we work with colleges in order to allow students to be able to take credits at the college level while also taking credits at the secondary school level in order to work towards a diploma. And we also have SHISMs, which focus around many of the sector council types of programming that provide schools with funding in order to support movement into opportunities for skills trades training while maintaining their continuation of their programming within the secondary construct. All three of these programs have been increasing appeal to students over time, and how we have had extremely good results for our students as far as achievement, especially in areas such as dual credit, where we have probably around 95 to 96% of our students being successful in those courses. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. Just appreciate you sharing that for all of our awareness. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Trustee McLean, and then I have a question as well.
Thank you, and through the chair. I pride myself on being someone who's very supportive of the opportunity that the trades represent for students and removing the stigma associated with that path that has always existed since when I went to school. I think it's a great opportunity for students to be able to a tremendous opportunity for students to be able to pursue. That being said, when I saw this, it startled me, and it seemed just like a big reach. Like it seemed it seemed disproportional in what it was trying to accomplish. I'm very concerned about what it limits 14-year-olds making choices, as it was shared, that could be really potentially damaging So, but I am a little concerned with the language. Like, I've been around long enough that they introduced, the province introduced mandatory online courses. And we objected to those, and we advocated against those. And we sent letters, but the motion requires that the chair respond to the consultation on behalf of the board with the following, and that we reject the models. And I guess I'm asking, is it within our authority to reject that which the province mandates? Like, can we do this?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I do not believe if there's a change in regulation that we can outright not provide it as a pathway to our students. We can certainly counsel our students about the ramifications of taking advantage of this pathway, but to remove it fully, I'm not certain that we can do that.
Okay, thank you. That was, like, I'm supportive of what this attempts to accomplish. I agree that I would much prefer they take 2 steps backwards and endeavor to go about what I think is a decent idea that started a conversation for them and go about it and do it differently. But the language of this is a little tricky for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Trustee McLean. Can I pass the chair to you, Vice Chair Shen?
Go ahead, Trustee Chenisler.
Thank you. I think there's a way to do this because the ministry has actually asked for feedback. They have a portal that's open for feedback until November 24th. The ministry is actually encouraging feedback on what they've put forward. The first red flag for me about some of the proposed changes that they were doing was back when I delegated on Bill 98, the person on the panel, there were 2 other people on the panel with me at the same time. One of them was Kathy Abraham from OBSPA, but the other person was representing business interests, like construction interests. So, and each time the ministry and the minister in particular talks about this piece of legislation and wanting feedback, he talks about the fact that, yes, of course they want feedback from school boards, but they're also getting a lot of feedback from the home building industry. This is really, they're seeking a lot of input from what do the trades need. We have to really focus on what do students need, right? Like, it's one thing, yes, we want kids to graduate with potential for jobs. We want them to have security as they grow older. We want them to be employable. But we want them to have life skills as well, right? So we want to make sure that whatever pathways we're providing for kids, that if they want to move out of that industry into something else, they have to have the right skill set developed through high school and potentially beyond. So I think it's really important that school boards make their voices known, because I think we're just, we're almost the small player here in terms of feedback that the ministry is getting. That's my worry. That's my biggest worry. And I really do think because of the conversations that I think the ministry has been having and this particular government is having about building houses, I think this is really about, I think a lot of this is about saving money, because we will lose funding in this. They won't have to fund us through this. I think it's about potentially improving graduation rates, because they would be providing students with a certificate, like a graduation certificate, I think is my understanding, without necessarily having done the traditional requirements. And so I would like staff, just in light of some of the things that I'm anxious about, we have education experts in the room. I would like to hear from staff on what they think about this, and I'm hoping that they're willing to comment understanding that, yes, we want to support the trades. Yes, we want to support student interests in all of these various things. Yes, we want them to be employable, but where do staff feel where's the sweet spot, I guess? And perhaps that will also help guide us as we do this feedback.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I'll begin. First of all, through you, Chair, if the previous question was, is the board able to comment on these proposed regulatory changes? My answer to that is yes, and that the board has, along with staff in the past, commented on regulatory changes that we think will have significant impact either on the board and or student achievement. So if I answered the question, otherwise I apologize. Staff share almost all of the same views articulated in this motion. I think over the last 2 years as director, I have publicly stated my support for apprenticeships and for students pursuing viable careers in the trades post-secondary. Our obligation as educators is to give students choices as they leave us, knowing that many young people will have 2, 3, 4, 10 different jobs in their lifetime. And that is absolutely critical in this particular pathway. Although it may be advantageous to a small group of students, if it becomes a viable pathway that is engaged in without understanding the long-term implications on one's educational possibilities, will close doors for young people. And it will close doors likely for young people who do not have the counseling or advice to make different choices, and those are underserved young people that this board has championed their opportunities for many, many years. So I think the dialogue in the room today, as well as what is reflected in this motion, very much is consistent with the concerns shared by staff, and it in no way detracts from our belief that the trades and apprenticeships are viable pathways for young people who choose to pursue them post-secondary.
I have a follow-up as well, Vice Chair Shan, if that's okay. This isn't so much a question as it is sort of a reflection on what I've heard. There has been, I think the discussion's been really great tonight. I think when we go to write this letter, we'll have to replay this meeting to hear some of these pieces, but also I know staff will help in crafting this. But this has been a topic around the OBSPA table, I feel like, for quite some time, because we've kind of seen some of this coming, it feels like. And one of the things that I've heard and that I do really worry about with this is, and I think about this, job sites are adult worlds, right? They're adult worlds where I don't mean to impugn the people running job sites, but they're not necessarily educators who are really tasked with nurturing young people. And so there has been concern expressed, I've heard, by trustees, often in rural boards as well, where the job sites might be far away, and how do kids get there? Like, they're no longer taking a school bus. Are they getting in somebody's truck, like, to get there? What happens to them? When we have kids in school, there's like eyes on them, there's adults on them, there's all those human connections. And it's not to say we don't have that on job sites, and I don't mean to impugn any industry or anything like that, but schools are nurturing environments, and that control goes away from a parent perspective, from a board perspective, when kids enter an adult world. And I feel nervous about that piece, even from some of the comments that I hadn't quite thought about, like the one about how do kids get there, like what happens in those pieces. So rural boards may have different concerns than we have, but I think they're all related to sort of kids' safety, preparing them for the future. I know I'm over my time, so I'll stop there. Okay, Trustee Laskin, I know you had asked to be back on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to respond to Trustee McLean's concern, I think you made the point. This is a consultation. In a consultation, we can actually tell them to rip it all up and start over again. But I think he's absolutely right. Unfortunately, whatever they do come up with is something we have to abide by. And I think that's why the consultation is so important, because we're doing our best. And I know the OPSPA policy work team is also meeting the first week of November to put something specific in, and also working with the education experts, because, you know, I'm not saying they're going to listen to us, because I think you're absolutely right, whoever made the point that this is about people getting workers as opposed to it is educating kids. And I think that's been pretty clear with this government all the way through. Maybe this is something else they can backtrack on. Thank you.
Trustee McLean, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to go back on the list. Am I next on the list?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't into this
There is no
rebuttal thing.
no list.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, I'm just, you know, listening to the chair describe her concerns reminds me of the work that some of us do at cell meetings. We have students that are looking to enter the workplace, and all the and we are responsible for those students until their 18th birthday. And all of the work we do and to safeguard them and make sure that when we allow them to join temporarily the workforce, all of the measures we put in place to protect them and to make sure that they're safe environments, and they're, you know, that, and to go from there to this scene, you know, where, you know, okay, you're done, and you know, where you go and into the workforce, like, it becomes a really tricky situation. And I do think we are asking an awful lot of young people to be able to not to be tempted by that which is so close, when the chemistry course they're taking might be a little challenging, and this might look good. So I'm just wanted to share that in those cell meetings, all the efforts we go to safeguard those students, to make sure, even when we allow them to leave temporarily and to join, to temporarily join the workforce and get some, you know, that is designed to hopefully bring them back to us so that they can get inspired about their education. You know, we're very cognizant of protecting them, and this scares me a little bit. So happy to support. Thank you.
Trustee Earhart, would you like to, you can certainly be added to the list again, but you also, as the mover, have the ability to close as well.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I wanted to speak to some of the discussion now, but Trustee Laskin didn't speak much, and I'm very grateful to her for seconding the motion and working with me on this in a very rush state, because we have such limited time around engaging on this. The engagement closes November 24th, and we are moving to the only board meeting we'll be having during that window. So I'm saying that because I worry that there may not be sufficient time for boards to comment in the fulsome weight that a board motion would provide on this. And I don't agree with such limited time windows for engagements on such large things. So the language is reflective of that. The tone is reflective of how serious I think this one is. Some of my experiences as an 18-year-old on job sites at the time where there were workplace deaths in university-level co-op programs included washroom access, sexual harassment and not understanding where to go for sexual harassment. It included not knowing what my workplace rights were from walking in to enter a building to where I could access my PPE. These are just examples off the top of my head that it took me years to learn that I had rights to ask for those things and to understand as a woman on a job site, as a white woman on a job site, but one who completed a high school education and had a very clear voice, what I could and could not speak out for there, how to make claims when there were injuries. These are some examples. to put 16 minors in that kind of system without the oversight that schools provide is, I think, unimaginable. I'm very supportive of the OYAP program and want to speak very highly of the supports that are put in place right now and that are constantly being worked on to support students that are currently working on job sites every day as part of completion of their high school diplomas. And so we are already as school boards grappling with these issues and working in close collaboration with the private sector on these issues. I do not believe the private sector should be doing this alone without supports. We don't want to go into that world and in that phase so quickly. I also don't believe that this is the model we want to be doing as a society when we have workplace shortages. We don't lower the age to get people into the workforce. There are proposals in the states right now around lowering there's all kinds of proposals out there to deal with what's going on with labor shortages. I do not believe that we roll back children's rights in order to solve short-term labor challenges. I believe very fundamentally in that, and I know so many around this table do as well. I think it's a very important time to speak out very loud for children's rights in this capacity as well. Thank you.
Okay. Can I pass the chair to you just to add one more thing? Just to assure everybody, I think we do have time to do this because we have this motion can go to board on November 1st, and then we have a chunk of time to really work on this. So I'm not concerned about that timeline, just to assuage Trustee Earhart and others. I think we can get this done. Trustee Hastings.
Thank you for thank you for allowing me to ramble on, but I won't ramble on. I see eye to eye with the trustee across the way, and I've been there, I've done that, I've lost friends, and out there in the working world, they don't care about what you are, who you are. They're going, oh, we want our work done, and they will push, push, push. Accidents happen. I'd like to support what the trustee is trying to get across in that I'd like to have the kids educated. I'd like to also, according to my friend up the way, have the kids also protected. If they get pushed out into the working world, there is no protection. There's nothing that you're going to be able to do from here to protect them out there. And so I want them recognized in both places if you're going to push that along. And yes, you do. Yes, we've done this before. We've had shipbuilders we've had shipbuilders in the 1600s that started out as 7-year-olds. I'd like to see the kids registered in both places and our eyes on them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Hastings. I am not seeing any more comments or hands raised, questions. So I think we can open the vote on this motion. And I'm in favor.
Kristen Naraj in favor.
Dawson in favor.
Trustee.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Rajkulasingham. Trustee Patel, Trustee Pay, and Trustee Lee.
Patel in favor.
Thank you.
Pay in favor.
Thank you. Okay, and that has carried unanimously. Next up, we have some written notices of motion for consideration. We'll just wait for eScribe to catch up. Okay, The first one is item number 7.1. This is support for the Ontario Human Rights Commission's request for a provincial anti-hate strategy. And because I'm one of the movers, I'm going to pass the chair to Vice Chair Shen to oversee this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Trustee Laskin want to speak on it first?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I had a great speech prepared for this a few weeks ago when I first moved it. I was very impressed by the Ontario Human Rights Council. They've been asking for months to the province to have a provincial anti-hate strategy for which we can all come under. But a lot has changed since the end of September, and I believe the need for this is completely self-evident. I'm not going to be speaking further to it. It's up to the board to decide what to do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's all right. Trustee Chonaslin, do you want to add anything else before I go to speakers?
I think the motion is self-evident. I think this is something that I hope everybody will support. I think we've seen anybody who's been on Twitter in the last few weeks has seen a pretty depressing, painful world where there's a lot of hate flying around. So I think what Trustee Laskin is expressing is the pain that many of us have felt and seen so evidently in our city, sometimes in our schools, certainly across the city, across the province, across the country, across all countries across the world in the last couple of weeks. It's very heavy for a lot of us, I think for probably all of us. And I think the need for this is really self-evident. So I think the motion speaks for itself. I hope people have had time to read it, reflect on it. It's been out for quite a while, so I'm assuming everyone has, and I hope that you will support it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item? Trustee King?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you to the movers. Again, it is very self-evident. I just have a question with respect to point E, just the other institutions or parties being copied. Just wondering if there was any consideration for maybe copying our education unions as well. I'm thinking about just the impact that this can have in our school environments, thinking about us as a partnership. I think our education unions would be very concerned and on board with the experience of staff in our schools as well. If I just kind of think about some of the support, some of the public statements that we saw from the unions with the 2S LGBTQ, anti-trans, anti-homophobic issues and protests that came up, I think I recall every single union putting out a statement of solidarity. So I think that would strengthen and really send a message of unity and solidarity from the education sector with respect to this motion.
Sorry. Is that a request for movers to make that amendment as a friendly amendment? Would you like to entertain that?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it does say et cetera, so I believe that gives us the leeway to include all the education sector unions.
Thank you. Trustee Arts?
And thank you for that comment.
Maybe this is too specific a question at the moment, but do we assume, or do the movers assume that a strategy, in big terms, that a strategy or strategic plan like this will involve data collection? And I just bring that up because the Ministry of Education required this year all boards to start collecting identity-based data, but then limited the mandatory collection to race-based data. And we know that students are there's multiple intersectionalities and students are much more complex. And so the call from OBSPA was for the ministry to collect comprehensive identity data about students. That includes the full list of what's in here from the Ontario Human Rights Commission. So are we already assuming that a strategy includes data collection? Or is that something that would need to be highlighted?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Through you, Mr. Chair, can you see where that would fit in, Trustee Arts?
Perhaps under B, I guess because it's in the developing part, that there would be data collection would fall under B, would it?
So it reflects the most recent current evidence data, practices in human rights? Like, would you just insert the word data there?
Yes.
All right, I would consider that, is that okay to have it as a friendly amendment as well? If there's a friendly amendment?
However you decide to deal with it, Mr. Chair, that's up to you, but I have no issues with adding that. It just makes it better.
Okay. Seeing no objection from the floor, we'll move on to the next speaker. Any other speakers on this? Okay. Seeing no other speakers, let's move on to the vote. So we have a mover, Trustee Laskin, seconded by Trustee Cherneslin. We're going to describe to vote on this item.
Dawson in favor.
Lee in favor.
Swiss-Kanawaj in favor.
Earhart in favor.
Oh, there it is.
Patel in favor.
Pay in favor.
Trustee Pay? Trustee Pay, are you in favor of this motion?
Free in favor. Thank you.
And Trustee Rajapala Singham?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that carries unanimously as well, and I'll pass the chair back to Chair Cherneslin.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shan. So up next, we have our second written notice of motion for consideration this evening. This is item, I think we're now at we're probably back to 7.2, right? We're back to 7.2. This is the Somali Center for Culture and Recreation, and the movers are Trustees Hassan and Dawson. Trustee Hassan, would you like to speak to this?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. To the chair. It's my pleasure to present this motion to this committee for its consideration. Over the course of the past several months, I benefited from the opportunity to have in-depth and wide-ranging conversations with many students, parents, educators, and community members. Many of these conversations were focused on enhancing the quality of our education system, identifying ways to boost the presence of the TDSB in our communities, and creating innovative partnerships between our school board and local community members as part of our mandate to expand learning opportunities for students throughout the school year. I have also heard the vital need for the TDSB to create quality opportunities to celebrate the culture and heritage of our diverse student populations in a sustained and meaningful way. I attended many community events with the Somali community in Toronto, including the area that I represent, York Southwestern. I learned about the almost half-century efforts of community advocacy to create a community center for our Somali students, parents, and community members in Toronto. A Somali community center that will service the broader community, but also be an important civic space to celebrate the beauty of Somali culture, to archive the long history of the community's presence in Canada, and to share it with our diverse populations in this wonderful city, Toronto. A place to offer and develop enriching programs from Somali children and youth, including early learning and educational support programs. As you're aware, every October since 2016 at the TDSB, we celebrate Somali Heritage Month. This celebratory month is a continuation and culmination of our year-long collective efforts to affirm, celebrate, and recognize the contributions and excellence of Somali students, staff, educators, trustees, and administrators in our education system. This month is even more special to us because we have the benefit of learning from the significant Somali student, parent, and staff population that we serve. I know they are proud of you for considering this motion and in supporting their long desire to establish a vibrant Somali Center for Culture and Recreation in Toronto. A collective dream that is close to reality with your support, but also the ongoing loud support of government officials from the City of Toronto, province, and the federal government. Let's add our voice to the hundreds of civic and philanthropic institutions that proudly proclaim their unwavering commitment to support the Somali community's collective dream to build a Somali Center for Culture and Recreation, an initiative that our Director of Education has also recognized its importance for our communities and the people we serve at the TDSB. I'm here to seek your unanimous support for this motion and for us to explore opportunities to collaborate with them on a partnership of mutual interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hassan. Any speakers on this item? Trustee Laskin?
Thank you very much.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
I passed the chair.
Take it home.
No problem. We did try at one point to ask the province to allow us to have co-chairs, not a chair and a vice chair, and they turned us down flat, just so you know. Thank you very much to the movers of this motion. I think anything we can do to support students to feel good about themselves coming to school and celebration of their cultures within communities needs to be celebrated in the TDSB, especially now. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to take over the chair because the vice chair has a comment as well or a question. So, oh, and Trustee Dawson as well. Okay, so we're going to go to Vice Chair Shen and then Trustee Dawson. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm proud and happy to support this motion. I came to this country as a refugee youth at the age of 16, and a lot of the experience of the Tamil community has very, I won't say same, similar experience of marginalization, experience of resilience that, that talks quite a bit about what is possible. And we know the Somali community has exhibited, despite all the adversities they faced, and they came from a very difficult situation, have made the best use of the opportunities and succeeded. And so this center is not just about Somali culture and heritage, it is a symbol of resilience, symbol of success, a story that everybody can learn from, every community can learn from and cherish and be part of the Toronto's vibrant history. So I think as an organization, as an institution that supports newcomers, refugees, it is important to also institutionalize some of these successes and stories of resilience, stories of, particularly I remember as a youth worker seeing Somali mothers and the organizing Somali mothers did around some of the issues that the community was facing when the systems were failing them, when the systems were not supporting them enough. Looking at them and being inspired by them was a phenomenal thing for me as a young person at those days. And to have this center that can carry those histories and reflect those histories would be something that our students can go on a field trip from any school, not just Somali students, and be experiencing that story. And so I'm looking forward to not just supporting the motion, but working together as somebody who worked on the Tamil Community Center that's getting built in the northeast corner of the city with the city, provincial, and federal partnership. I'm looking forward to being a strong ally and seeing this happen. So I'm happy Trustee Hassan has moved this, and I'm more than happy to not just support motion, but support the project. Thank you.
And over to Trustee Dawson.
Thank you so much. Through the chair, I'll be brief. I just, when Trustee Hassan came to me to support this motion, it was my absolute pleasure I think it's a wonderful good news story and a testament to the resilience of the Somali community. I'm happy to support it, and I applaud Trustee Hassan for working with community to get this done. So thank you very much for involving me, and I am very happy to be voting in favor.
Okay, we have 2 more speakers, Trustee King, 3 more speakers, Trustee King, Trustee Ditavides, and Trustee Pay.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you so much for bringing this forward. It's so exciting to see, not just for what it does to build community, but excited to see, to Trustee Shan's point about the partnership. I think the relationship and the opportunity there to work together is really, really exciting. The other element in here that I just want to point out is I think it's a wonderful way to be able to contribute to economic strengthening of a community as well. One of the things that I've come across dealing with different communities that don't have a space of their own in the city is that every time you try to do something to come together to have a space, you're often paying out investing into other communities. And this is a way to really reinvest and center community as well. I know that that's not necessarily our focus here, but I think it's a great byproduct of the goals that interest us in this motion. I was just wondering, I did look up just a little bit of the history just to understand how it got to this point, and I'm just wondering if there's any update at all just in terms of where they are in finding a location, where financing stands, just so we have a sense of where this is.
Thank you, Trustee King, through the chair. So I don't sit on the committee for the Somali Community Center, so I'm not too familiar with all the in-depth details, but I do know that they're working night and day with the city and the province and members from the federal government to try and establish somewhere in the city where they can, get land and a place that they can build. And I think they have received funding as of date for their engagements that they've been doing throughout the city. I've attended several of their consultations in the West End, downtown, and Scarborough. So they've done a great job so far. They still got a long way to go, but just in terms of those intricate details, I'm not quite sure. So hope that answers your question.
Still an exciting start, and I'm sure that we'll hear more as it develops. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next up, we have Trustee Ditavides, and so I'm really tired. I don't know what's going on with my brain. And Trustee Pay will be after that. Thanks.
Thank you, through the chair. I want to thank my neighbor here today, but then also my physical neighbor. Our boundaries are neighboring, and I was just yesterday in Trustee Hassan's ward at Westing Collegiate for a joint MYSP consultation, and we share a lot of things in common. And one of them is the very significant Somali community in both our wards, both our districts. I have a very long relationship with many of the folks in the Somali community in the neighborhood, and just to see this project come arise is great, because it's a lot of the youth in the community that grew up in Toronto, first generation, that came here often as children, refugees, many of them, and to see them take up the project is very refreshing. A lot of the news out there is negative. This is positive. This is a great project. Very happy to support it. To be honest, I wouldn't dare to even think about not supporting because of all the antis out there that go after me in all the different neighborhoods and communities, Tobermory, Fairgrove, Ardwick, Duncan Woods, and all these other places I would never be able to show my face again. So very happy to support it, very happy to champion this as we move forward, as Trustee Shan said, not just to support it here, but to support the project and the importance of that project to that promise of that Canadian dream that we can come here, set our roots as a community, and do better for the next generation. This is very important. So thank you, Trustee Hassan, for the initiative, and we'll be happily endorsing this.
Trustee Pay, please go ahead.
First, I want to congratulate, the mover, the great trustee Hassan, leading the Somali community to build this wonderful culture and recreation center. Also, I want to thank, the secondary trustee Dawson for helping on this wonderful course. And Trustee Hassan, I know you're the first Somali descent trustee at the TDSB. Congratulations again. That's 1 year ago you won the trustee. That was amazing accomplishment. Also, I met Somali community at the last year's your community event. Such wonderful group of people. They're resilient, they're determined, they're celebrative. Just amazing people. I think we need to support them all the way. I wholeheartedly support this motion. Thanks so much for bringing this motion to the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another great discussion. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other speakers on the list, so I think we can open the vote in eScribe.
Trustee Pei in favor?
Okay.
Dawson in favor.
Rajagul Singh, I'm in favor.
Patel in favor.
Earhart in favor.
Trustee Patel, how do you vote?
D is in favor.
Trustee Patel, how do you vote?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Have we got everybody? Okay, and that has carried unanimously. Great, everybody, 7:15 on the dot, 7:16. We just need a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Trustee Hassan, Trustee McLean, we are adjourned.